Hello learners, greetings to you all. I welcome you for this session. In the previous session, we learned about the structure of a plant cell and even the structure of an animal cell. We went further, we labeled the parts of a plant cell and even we labeled the parts of an animal cell. We went further and we even looked at the functions of each part found on each cell, and even we compared, or we had a comparison between a plant cell and an animal cell. Now I believe you know how a plant cell looks like, you know how an animal cell looks like, you know the parts that are found in a plant cell, and you know the parts that you can find on a plant cell, both the plant cell and animal cell. And you know those parts which we find both on the plant cell and an animal cell. And I believe you can give the functions of all the parts. Now, today we want to look at something else, still under cellulose, and we want to look at specialized cellulose and then the levels of organization. I welcome you for this session. Now, let's go straight forward to our session. Okay, learners, in this session, we are looking at specialized cellulose. But I have a question to ask you before we get further. We looked at the structure of a plant cell and an animal cell. And me and you, we are animals. I believe we agree that we are all animals because we belong to kingdom and Maria, as we shall see in classification. Learners, do you think all the cells that we have in our body are of the same shape? Because our cells are animal cells. Do you think those cells look alike, all of them? Do you think the cells we find in the eye resemble the cells we find in the nose? Do you think the cells we find in the fingers resemble the cells we are finding within the elbow or this part of the hand? Learners, it's now want to know, do those cells look alike? And the answer is no. We are saying specialized cells. These are cells that have unique shape and structure to enable them perform specific functions. Learners, cells undergo what we are calling modification. Cells change their structure and change their shape to enable them perform specific functions effectively. They don't look alike, but they have some structures, or they have parts which are common to all of them. And that's why we come over and say these are animal cells and these are plant cells. Though they have some unique features that distinguish one cell from the other, though they are all animal cells or they are all plant cells. And it's what we are going to look at. What brings about this modification is because that these cells are not found in the same part or they don't perform the same function. As you know, the eye is to see, the nose is to smell, the mouth is to speak and even to eat. The hands are to touch. The legs are to move. So the cells we find in the eye cannot resemble the cells we find in the nose, and the same way the cells we find in the nose cannot resemble the cells we find in the legs or the hands or the mouth. So the differences in what these cells do is what brings about the differences in their structure. Therefore, they undergo modification. And here we are looking at the examples of the specialized cells we have. I have not exhausted all, but at least I have mentioned out many of them. The first one is the red blood cell. A red blood cell, this one, is found in blood. We know from our primary level, we looked at red blood cells, and we said the red blood cell is the cell that is responsible for oxygen transportation in the body. So these cells are modified, or they have unique structure and shape You see, we looked at the structure of one animal cell. The structure of one animal cell had this shape. It was not so circular, but it was of like a circular form. And the structure of an animal cell was of this kind. But look at now the structure of a red blood cell. It is biconcave. It has a biconcave shape, as you can see it. What is bringing about this difference? This cell is responsible for oxygen transportation. And where does it pass as it's transporting oxygen? It passes through the veins and arteries or the blood vessels. And these blood vessels are narrow. So to have this shape, it enables it to squeeze within the blood vessels. Therefore, it adopts this shape to enable it move within the blood vessels. Then, when we look at it, an addition of this, the red blood cells do not have a nucleus. They do not have a nucleus, and so it has an essential component on all cells, both plant and animal. But the red blood cell does not have a nucleus, and it lacks some other cell contents or cell organelles. Why is it lacking those ones? The reason that's why it lacks those, it is because the red blood cell has to create enough space for oxygen carriage as it transports oxygen from one part of the body to another. So the reason as to why the red blood cell looks like this or adopts this shape and structure is because of the functions it carries out. 2. We have the muscle cells. Learners, muscles. We have muscles in the body. We have the muscles everywhere you know these things when people do like this, they say those are muscles. So we are looking at the muscle cells. We are seeing. When we look at the structure of the muscle cell, it is of this side. Now, what's the difference? And we look at the muscle cells. This was the structure of the animal cell we looked at. But now look at the structure of the muscle cell. It is somewhat like its bulb is at the middle, and at the extreme ends, it is tapered or sharpened. Why is it like this? And another thing to add on, this cell or the muscles, the cells of the muscles, for them, they have a large amount of mitochondria. Mitochondria, in the previous session we said, mitochondria are responsible for energy production. They are sites where energy is produced in the cell. Now, these cells of the muscles help us to move, help us to talk, help us to do everything, most of the things we do that require moving, especially movements. Now, these cells have a large amount of mitochondria to supply them with energy to enable us move, talk, and hold things like that. So that is a modification for muscle cells. They have a unique shape and structure enabling them perform their function effectively. Another is the egg cell. The egg cell, this is the cell that is responsible for fertilization. This cell occurs in fertilization. We find that this cell is fertilized by the sperm cells from the male, and therefore we form a zygote. Look at the structure of an egg cell. It is an animal cell. This is also an animal cell, and this is also an animal cell. But look at the egg cell. It does not resemble these ones, and it does not resemble the primary structure of an animal cell we looked at. Why? Because it performs a specific function. That is reproduction. Now when we look here, when we look at it, the cell has even this outer layer. This outer layer. And we don't have it here, because when we look inside here, this is its cell membrane. But it has an outer layer. This outer layer has helped to protect it. And when you look at inside, does it resemble the original or the general structure of an animal cell? No, because of its function. This outer membrane helps to protect the inner cell or inner contents of the cell, and inside, in addition to that, it has a lot of food stores. The reason why it has food stores, this cell has to support the embryo at fertilization. Immediately after fertilization, the embryo will have to feed on the food that is stored within this cell. Therefore, it must have enough glucose stores or food stores within it. That is its modification or its unique shape and structure. Then we go to the sperm cell. The sperm cell, as you look at it, it has a head. This one is called the enzyme. Now, for it, it is of this shape. Why is it looking like this? When we look at the structure of an animal cell, its shape, it never had a tail, but this one has a tail. Why? Because it's responsible for fertilization still. And now what does this one do? It has to swim to find the egg cell so that they can fuse, so that fertilization takes place. Now, this tail helps this cell to swim so that it can move to reach the egg cell. Therefore, this tail enables it to move, and it is sharp at the end to enable it enter the egg cell so that the two nuclei of the egg cell and the sperm cell can fuse. Therefore, fertilization takes place. Another one. These are specialized cells in animal cells. There are very many cells that are specialized. Just that I have picked out these ones. We even have the nerve cell and many other cells. When you read more books, you can find them there and you have a look at them. Let us go to the specialist cells in plants. I have some examples I have brought for you. We have the Garden cell. We looked at the structure of a plant cell, and we saw that a plant cell takes a structure which was somehow hexagonal. I said it is hexagonal, though it may not be of a regular hexagon. It may not have the same size, but the cells appear in this one. And it may not be hexagonal, it can be pentagonal, because we say it is polygonal. It has sides in such a way. Look at the structure of a Garden cell. It does not have sides. You cannot say it is a polygon or it is a polygon. The cells are crescent shaped. They are crescent shaped as you look at them. Why are they like this? This is the virtue, this is the virtue, and the cells are crescent shaped and they are two joined together. Now, the Garden cell is the cell that helps to protect the stomata or the stomach, the opening on the leaves that enables plants to carry out gaseous exchange and even absorb carbon dioxide to be used in the process of photosynthesis to manufacture their own food. So these cells are like this because they have to close and open to enable the opening and closure of the stomata. So when they bulge like this, they open and the stomata is open so that the carbon dioxide can enter for photosynthesis and oxygen can come out from photosynthesis, or even oxygen can enter for respiration and carbon dioxide comes out. Those are the Garden cells. So their shape is crescent shaped and they are joined together. So because of the function they perform, that's why they look like this. Then we look at the root hair cell. This is the cell of the root hair. The root hair, we look at the root. Those very small or tiny roots that originate from the lateral roots and the taproot, they are what we are calling the root hairs. And now their cells look like this. The root hairs primarily are responsible for absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. Now, this is how they look like. I see the structure of a plant cell took this shape, but look at this one. At least it brings out like the idea of being polygonal. It has sides, because this is a continuation of another cell. But we are looking at this one. Let us concentrate on this one specifically, this one here. Look at it. It at least takes the shape. It brings about the idea of being polygonal. But it has this one, the extension this, and our cell never had such an extension. So, and you see this virtue goes up to this end, it has the cytoplasm to this end, here's the nucleus, and this is the cell wall. and even the cell membrane is inside here. Why is it looking like this? Now, for it to absorb water and mineral salts, it takes up an extension in order to absorb water and mineral salts, and even to penetrate into the deep layers of the soil or the cracks in the soil. So that is how cells of animals and plants are modified or take up unique shape and structure, enable them perform specific functions effectively. That is all about specialized cells. So class or learners, just know cells are not of the same kind. Cells have differences, and if these differences in the cells come as a result of the functions they perform. So that's about specialized cells. And our next thing to look at in this session is the levels of organization. Levels of organization. As I told you in the start when I was starting the session. Now, learners, remember in the introduction to biology, or even as we started the topic of cells, we have organisms that are multicellular, while other organisms are unicellular. Unicellular means that organism has only one cell. And multicellular, it means they have several cells. There are some organisms where one cell alone serves as the entire organism, while there are other organisms where very many cells aggregate or come together to form what we are calling an organism. Now, remember we said a cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life, meaning an organism is what it is because of cells. Now we are looking at how cells organize themselves, how cells collect themselves to come up with what we are calling an organism, and that is the levels of organization. For this case, we are looking at organisms that are multicellular, that have cells that join up to form an organism, which an organism that is made up of more than one cell. That is multicellular organisms. And here we go. One cell we looked at, when cells combine, they form what we are calling tissue. So a tissue is a group of cells that come together or that are connected together to perform a specific function. It is called a tissue. So tissue is a group of cells that join up to perform a specific function. And from a tissue, tissues combine, very many tissues combine, and they form what we are calling an organ. So in simple terms, an organ is a group of tissues. And now, very many organisms combine to form what we are calling an organ system. And we shall look at this. Then, very many organ systems, or more than one organ system, join up to form what we are calling a complete organism. For example, man, bats, or any other living organism that you know, and it is multicellular, as we shall look at it then. Let us go to this one. We have examples of tissues. I will not talk about examples of cells because we're talking about cells, and in this first session we have looked at specialized cells. Now here we go. I want to talk about tissues, organ systems, and the organism. We say the cell is the best structure and function unit of life. Look, very many cells join up to form tissues. And examples of tissues we have blood. Blood is made up of very many cells. We have the red blood cell, have the white blood cell, we have the platelets. So, three kinds of cells come up together to form what we are calling blood, and this is a tissue. We have bone. A bone or bone tissue is formed by cells of the bone, and these are called osteocytes. Cells join up to form what we are calling the bone. Come, the cartilage. A cartilage is also cell tissue. It is formed by cells of the cartilage. So very many cells join up to form what we are calling a cartilage. Then we have a muscle tissue. Muscles, as I talked about them, these are formed by the cells we have looked at in this main session under specialized cells. We looked at muscle cells. So those cells join up to form what we are calling a muscle. And we shall see how this one comes. I'll take an example. We have cells of the muscle, and assuming these are cells which are forming the muscle we are calling cardiac muscle. So, cardiac muscle is made up of cells. So these cells form up a tissue we are calling the cardiac muscle. And we are going to see that once this tissue is formed, these tissues are going to combine also, all come together, and they form what we are calling an organ. And if you remember from your primary, we said the heart is made up of cardiac muscles. So these muscles are going to form what we are calling an organ, and the organ is the heart. So cardiac muscles, which are tissues, combine to form what we are calling an organ, and the organ is heart. But these tissues are formed as a result of cells coming together. Hope you are seeing how we are moving from a cell go to a tissue, and from a tissue now we are an organ. We are moving in the line. Now, this organ which has been formed, the heart, from the tissue which is cardiac muscle, is going to comprise of a certain organ system, and this organ system, for this test, which system of your body does the heart belong? That is the circulatory system. It does not form the circulatory system alone, but the heart with other organs that are formed from other tissues, which are formed from other cells, they combine and they form what you are calling the circulatory system. And now, a circulatory system is one of the systems that form the body of an organism. For example, man, that's me and you. Lungs. I can give another example. We have very many organs in the body. Just imagine if these organs were not there. Would we live? Look at the liver, look at the heart, the lungs, the brain, the kidneys, eyes, ears. These are all organs of the body, and they are formed from tissues. I've given an example of the heart. Even the brain is formed from tissues. The kidneys are formed from tissues. Eyes are formed from tissues, ears from tissues, and many others. Look at the functions of those organs. And now, these organs will join up to form what we are calling an organ system. For example, the respiratory system. This one is responsible for gaseous exchange. And which organs form up the respiratory system? Of course, the lungs are there. And remember, we have said the lungs are formed from cells, and the cells form a tissue, and the tissue forms the lungs. Now, the lungs comprise of a system, the reproductive system. These are formed also. It consists of organs, and these organs are formed from cells. So, which cells are going to form tissues? The tissues form the organ, and the organ is now forming the system. The skeletal system. This one comprises of bodies and muscles. You can even call it the supporting system. We have looked at the muscles. The muscles these muscles now which form the skeletal system are called the skeletal muscles. For example, those of the biceps and the triceps. The muscles of the arm, the muscles of the limbs or the legs, those are the muscles. We have the nervous system. This one is responsible for communication through impulses. When you touch something which is hot, you are able to tell that is hot because of the nervous system. The excretory system. This one is responsible for removing waste products from our body. And it's also made up of organs. For example, the kidney forms up the excretory system. We have the digestive system. The digestive system is made up of organs. For example, the liver can even be part of the digestive system because it produces some fluids which are needed in the digestive system. We have the stomach, it's not an organ of the digestive system. And we have the circulatory system. I've talked about that the heart is a member, and the heart is formed from cells, which cells form tissues, tissues form organ systems, and now the organ systems will make up an organism. Just look, I have a question now for you. Look at the systems we have in our body. And even others I may have not mentioned here. The ones I may have left out. Look at the organs in each system. Look at the tissues that are forming up those organs. And now, look at the cells that are forming up those tissues. I have a question, learners. How many cells do you think we have in our bodies? How many cells could we be having in our bodies? And now, by looking at this marks the end of today's session. Thank you.